Greg, um, let me kick it off by asking you a question. You just went through the risk factors and the attributes, but you did so from a process standpoint. When are we going to have data to fill in as we head toward a mid to late October decision point?
Oh, as far as reviewing the risk register itself, looking at how everything, the data, how everything's quantified and listed out. We are ready.
That X is a risk factor, but what we really need to know is how risky is it? What are the odds of it happening, and how bad is it if it does happen? That's the kind of thing that leads to a decision on replace versus repair.
So I think if my understanding with talking with Heather, by the next CTF, we will have the full risk register vetted out. Right now, we have the initial risk register that has all the probabilities, the impacts, as well as the monetized risks. So we have it pretty much completed. We did want to get some input from the TAP tomorrow and look at it internally and then get that out. So I think as far as I'm concerned, we're ready. I think there's just a few steps that Heather would like to get us through before we really get it out. But it's, as far as I'm concerned, we're there. We just need some final input today. But we're pretty far along with that risk register for sure, as well as the quantified attributes. So.
And when will we get to look at that information to be able to comment and advise the mayor?
My hope is by next week, we will have discussed it tomorrow with the TAP. We will have internally vetted it, got everything squared away, and then we can get it out next week. I was thinking by next week sometime, and I would like to confirm that with Heather, because I know there's some certain steps in the roadmap, she has in mind, but if I could we could even confirm that after this, but let's just say next week, we would be ready with the information, provided it follows the sequence of the roadmap.
Okay. And so the following week we have a meeting, so we could get it out next week. People will have a chance to review it. And then at our subsequent meeting, we'd have the guts, the data, the fill in the blanks, as opposed to more of a process conversation.
You bet. And honestly, if we want to get at least a week out in advance so folks have a chance to look at it. So I think that timing works well. Then if we can get it out next week, that would give everyone in the CTF enough time to review it in advance of the meeting the week after. So
great, good.
That's aligning. Okay. And
I did ask that the technical advisory panel co-chairs join us for that conversation when we have it in a couple of weeks.
Excellent.
Okay. So I don't see anything on the chat. I don't know how to tell if someone's got their hand up. So I'm going to need help with that. But who's got a question? Who's got a comment, a thought that they want to share? Yes. Mr. Waters, you're muted.
Thank you.
You bet.
I've got one question for you, Greg. I'm looking at the attributes on business and workforce impacts. We're looking at a lot of this as local impacts with vehicular miles traveled and those kinds of things. What I'm kind of curious about is, I represent the ports, right? Or the terminal operators at Terminal 5 and Terminal 18. And these impact businesses statewide. We've got 30% of the jobs in the state tied to international trade. I'm wondering if we're looking at things on too narrow a basis, or if we're including all of those kinds of impacts that can happen to, farmers in Eastern Washington trying to export goods and everything else, right?
So you're thinking we're looking too broadly and not as not at the true local impacts?
No, I'm thinking maybe too narrowly. too narrowly in terms of just looking at vehicular miles traveled, those kinds of things from a local standpoint, but not the business impacts throughout the entire state of Washington that really has an impact here, right? That was my question.
You're right. We have not looked statewide, and I think that's something that we could talk more about. Is should we be looking more broadly, regionally or statewide at the impacts rather than just at this local level? I could note that.
Yeah, because there's tens of thousands of jobs statewide that are impacted by this, right?
It's a good question. So I think it's something we should look at closely, and because I don't think we look that broadly. You're correct. Yeah.
So the upshot of that would be to show a greater economic impact that would occur the longer the delay is.
I think that's right, and limited access to the terminals at Terminal 5 and Terminal 18, Greg.
Right. Okay.
Okay. It's a good point. Thank you.
All right. Yes.
I'm Kevin
Ann.
Broblett. I'm with West
Oh.
Seattle Bridge now.
All right,
Yeah,
Kevin, and then Ann. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm stepping in for Amanda today. I guess my question is in the same vein regarding the impact to businesses that are in West Seattle. Is the potential economic loss for those also being considered? And our group has also gotten feedback that individuals are actually, like, you know, with employment not being as robust as it has been, people interviewing for jobs, contemplating a new normal, and how does that impact both their ability to get to a new job, and also employers have been asking people like, oh, I see you're in West Seattle. If we go back to a in-person model, how big of an inconvenience is that going to be for you? So we're worried that individuals are being potentially discriminated against in an employment situation. And I guess I want to make sure that the full economic impact of both individuals and small businesses in the West Seattle community are also being considered in this category.
Okay.
So, Greg, could you tell us just a little bit more depth what your business and workforce impact review looks like? Can you go back to the next level?
Yeah. So as far as I think we all had the slide that shows our the attribute itself. So we're looking at bridge closure impacts, the trip reduction, obviously the impact of that, and that's going to be a monetary value right now that we're showing for that as an economic impact. We have another component called the indirect economic construction. What would it be? Construction from construction issue. So we have other construction projects in the vicinity that are also part of this equation. We have utility interruptions. That's another component of this attribute. Access impacts to local properties, and economic and workforce impacts on a region. And the economic and workforce impacts on the region, the unit of measure for that is we're looking at 50% quantitative as well as 50% qualitative. And whether it's a high risk or low risk is the qualitative part of that. And then trying to quantify 50% through equivalent full-time employees, FTEs. So that's right now how we're measuring that attribute. And I think this is one, I think that perhaps next week there's going to be a lot more discussion on it once we show what those measures are, the unit of measure and how we're measuring that. I'd like to get this out earlier the better, to be honest. I think if anything, the CTF, this is one attribute that should have a lot of input from the CTF and not so much from the engineers. But and I think that would be most helpful for us. So not sure if that answered your question, but if everybody looked at the attribute, Mayor Nichols, is there any questions around what we have as what the unit of measure is and how we're measuring it, especially the unit of measure at this point and what we're showing there.
But so I'm a little confused. You say that low risk, high risk is a qualitative judgment as opposed to quantitative?
Yeah, well, I guess there's going to be two parts of this attribute. It's qualitative and quantitative. We're going to try to quantify how many equivalent FTEs would be impacted.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Right? Yes, I was just agreeing. Go ahead.
Oh, and then qualitatively, yes. Is it a low, medium, or high risk of that? So that's right now how we have it identified. And we could adjust this. But that's pretty much how our economist right now has it identified on the attribute list.
Okay, so I've got Ann, then Dan, and then Peter Goldman. Ann?
So last couple of weeks, I keep thinking about the mandatory housing affordability upzoning that was passed by the city council last year, and the push for doing increasing density in single family lots, 5,000 square feet, by doing backyard cottages and things like that. And I asked in a previous meeting about what numbers were being used for capacity for the bridge, in response to a comment that the bridge was over capacity for what it was originally designed for. So I'm curious about, so if we're able to repair the bridge and it lasts for 10 years and it's close to capacity, that's fine. If we repair the bridge and it's good for 40 years, but it's not really good for 40 years because our capacity will be so high by the time we get there that it's not actually usable. I just keep sort of tumbling that over in my head and being concerned that we're not thinking about increased capacity needs as we move forward if the city sticks with its increased density requirements. I hope that makes sense.
Would you define, yeah, I think that was very clear. Would you define increased capacity as increased vehicle capacity? Or would you look at light rail, for instance, as being a capacity enhancement? Or getting back to normal on regular transit for that matter?
Yeah, this is, are you, Mayor Nichols, are you asking me?
I was asking Ann on that one.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I was thinking you were asking Greg. I know that there will be alternate methods of transportation as we move forward, but it's hard to imagine that with increased density, we wouldn't max out both the bridge and the public transit that is available to us. So I'm just wondering if those numbers are really being looked at as part of this analysis, because it seems like it's really critical. You know, there's two projects just on the block where our office is in West Seattle that are slated for about 50 more units. And they could be built anytime during this, while the bridge is down, and there will be many, many more of them in the future. So how do we manage that risk, I guess, is the question.
Go ahead, Greg.
I have for Greg.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. And so right now the CBA is not accounting for a future traffic forecast. In other words, we're just trying to restore the capacity at which we left off. So the TSNL, as we get into, and by the way, as we continue down the road of replacement planning, this is something that is absolutely going to be at forefront. In fact, we do have consultants on board already who are going to be looking at our traffic forecasting. And this kind of sets up our next phase of the planning for replacement, if we go that route. But as far as the CBA itself, we do not have the information on future traffic forecasts. So we're basing it off of the existing capacity of the bridge and baselining that as the as what a decision would restore the existing capacity that we left off with. But it's a really good point. I think in the essence of time and our decision in the schedule, we just don't have the time on our hands right now to accurately forecast the traffic demands for the future, as this is a repair or replace decision. However, point taken, very important that our next, as we continue planning, that our TSNL studies, our early planning studies, do account for that. And that's all I could say, is that it's not being ignored. It's an important issue for us, but with the essence of timing and keeping our schedule with the decision of repair or replace, it's more about restoring where we left off with that traffic capacity for the CBA process.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a good.
Dan, and then Peter.
Dan Austin here. This is for the Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to reinforce, I missed part of the business impact part being talked about. I couldn't unmute or get video off here, but that's been corrected. So I just strongly support as much focus on the business impact being weighted, and especially small business impacts. It's hard to separate between COVID and lack of bridge. But I do know on Alki, like the restaurateurs down there, hurt with COVID, but also people not being able to get to Alki. And then there's also the park restrictions. So it's hard to figure out what's causing it. But the small business community is hanging on by a thread right now as is. So really making sure we wait how long we're going to be disconnected from the rest of Peninsula will have a great economic impact, negative impact on the small business community. So I really want to make sure that's just dialed in for the CBA. And then Anne just kind of sparked a little thought of, it's a little weird to me that we'll consider the future traffic in a type, size, and location study, but we're being asked to decide if we should replace or repair without focusing that on the repair option. So I feel like I understand there's a tight timeline, but it seems very difficult to make the repair option if we know that it's going to be under capacity the moment we fix it. Does that statement make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I understand what you're saying. Mayor Nichols, did you have something to say?
Well, it's a much larger debate, but the whole reason of light rail coming to West Seattle is that we now do have that additional density in the junction and in the other business areas. And we can serve that better with transit than by trying to add more lanes to a system that's all. If you get across the high level, went back in the good old days when we could get across the high level bridge, you had some tough choices to make because there weren't any very attractive alternatives. You got stuck in a regional backup wherever you went, especially during the peak hours. So adding the capacity through light rail, getting Metro back to where it was in terms of being able to actually carry full loads of human beings, water taxi, and adding more service there, that's how, at least I think, we're going to get additional capacity. And then we're going to figure out how many people now are going to work from home rather than go to a job center like downtown. There are so many moving parts. It seems to me that it would be unlikely that SDOT would have that crystal ball. Long term, certainly we can make some assumptions, and we assume that the demand will be going up as we get additional density. But in the short run, when we make the decision between replacement and repair, it seems to me there are just too many of those variables. And what we need to focus on in the next month is the repair option attractive enough in terms of being relatively low cost, relatively high level of service compared with the pre-closure scenario, and safe. And if we get that answer and we can get 15, 20 years out of the thing, then I think, we can, with some confidence, advise the mayor that we think that's a good route to take because it opens us back up much faster than simply going to replacement. So I think this economic analysis is really important, but I think there's so many variables there. I would not want to get too stuck on that going forward, given we got a month basically to make that determination.
Yeah.
I also wanted to add that even before the bridge closed, before COVID, really our the city's plans around meeting increased peak hour demand, commute demand from West Seattle and from most parts of the city was and continues to be based on building transit capacity. And so that's why we have the jointly with Metro, the Rapid Ride H project on the Delridge corridor, the continued improvements in the CD or the C line corridor, and the ability through the STBD, if it passes, to add service on all the routes serving West Seattle.
Yeah, a lot of good points brought up here. That obviously it's a 7-lane bridge. It's quite a wide bridge right now, and it has a lot of capacity. It's how we best utilize that space in the future, whether it's transit, light rail. Would we be going any wider or building more lanes on a new structure? That's a huge question and a huge cost. And so we're looking at these other modes such as forward compatibility. The replacement options are obviously forward compatible for Sound Transit as well as transit as well. Bus transit. So we'll be looking at those opportunities instead of going wider, using our space more efficiently, and using intelligent transportation systems such as dynamic messaging and so forth. Those type of technologies and measures would be something we'd be looking at to get that capacity back rather than building a wider bridge.
Yes, thank you, Greg. Peter, and then Bob.
I think the mayor and Greg pretty much covered the points I was going to make. I'm really heartened to see that we're not putting too much emphasis on trying to achieve additional capacity in this structure, but we're looking at other ways to accommodate capacity. I guess what a schedule obviously is going to be important to the chamber and all folks who live in West Seattle. The only thing I want to say is until we know how much it's going to cost to repair and how long it will last and whether it will really be safe given seismic conditions. It's such a big issue. I would hate to sort of say, I'm a little worried about just doing something for a 10-year time window if it's going to be functionally obsolete in 10 years. Schedule is important, but building something that's going to be unsafe or obsolete in a short period of time concerns me too. So I think we need to balance schedule versus obsolescence a little. We need to talk about the word obsolescence a little bit more, just in terms of safety. So that's really all I don't know we're there yet, but that's what concerns me. Not building something that's going to be obsolete just to get a few more years out of it, a quick fix, because I don't know if that's going to be a wise use of our limited dollars.
Another really good point, Peter. Thank you for bringing that up. The big difference as we look at the Alt-2 option, it has a service life of 15 to 40 years. And that's one thing that I would like to dial in a bit here. Is it 15 or is it 40? Because it's a big difference. And again, that return on investment of, we spend so much less capital on Alt-2, and it becomes more of an O&M cost for the life cycle of that asset, but it's still a very cheap option for us to consider, especially if we can get in upwards of 40 years out of it. That is, to me, a big difference between getting 10 years out of it and 40. And I think that changes the whole return on investment as we look at the life cycle costs of all the alternatives.
Well, and I think even at 15, that's half again as much into this process thinking a repair.
That's correct.
So it is important for us to have that kind of information and know whether we're making a decision.
It's almost half the time we got out of the bridge already.
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, very true. Bob, and then I've got Charlie and Kevin, and I think at that point we'll be ready to move back to our original Zoom group.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My question was already answered in previous conversations, so we'll go to the next speaker.
Thank you. Charlie?
Thanks. Yeah, my previous question was answered, but just very quickly, is there any concern about the difference a November election might have on the availability of federal funding and how this factors in to what is available for repair versus replace? Just if the timeline is to make a decision in October, does 1 month make a difference?
Greg, do you have any response to that?
We
I think
have
that's a question we're all asking in a lot of different ways in our lives right now.
Yeah, that's for sure. We have approximately 60 potential funding sources that we're looking at right now, federal funding, all sorts of funding, state, federal, grants, loans, etc. We're exploring all of them, and there's potential obviously for that, but these are infrastructure grants, and I hope they're separate from some other things happening, and that we are this is a regional issue, and I think it's getting attention at obviously the highest levels. So we're hoping that we're most competitive for those grants even after the election, given the impact of this closure has on the region. I personally don't see it as an impact for, I guess, reducing the eligibility for us to be competitive for future grants, but that's just what I could say right now. I'm not sure if Mayor Nichols, you have anything.
Well, it just when the viaduct issue kind of raised its head after the Nisqually earthquake, I had the opportunity to go lobby Republican House for funding to replace the viaduct. And it was a guy named Don Young, who was the only congressman member of the House from Alaska. And I'm the mayor of a fairly liberal city that he doesn't necessarily have the fondest of thoughts about. But what I found was that that kind of public investment, the infrastructure investment, was not dealt with on an overly partisan basis. So whatever happens, I think it's going to be understood that we're going to need an economic stimulus, and investing in infrastructure is a relatively nonpartisan way to do that. And I think we'll be heard regardless of how the November election plays out. Now, how sympathetically we'll be heard, I think will change, but I think that will be on the national radar come January. Kevin.
Yeah, just a follow-up question on the economic impacts for Greg. So when the full CBA is unveiled, will we be able to see the specific details of how this category of risk was measured?
Absolutely.
I guess the question is, will we be able to reverse engineer the numbers? And then following on that, to what extent has the OED been working with SDOT to fully understand and quantify the potential economic impact?
So the answer to your first question is yes, you will see the units of measure and how they're measured for each of the components. So that is something you'll definitely see in the near future. As far as Office of Economic Development, they have been involved. They've been trying to help us quantify what some of these economic and workforce impacts would be within the region. However, we weren't able to get a lot of numbers out of that yet. I think right now we're working, our consultant has an expert who is an expert with the region as far as community impacts, workforce impacts, and economy impacts. So we're generating those measures from our consultant right now, and obviously running those through internally with our OED and SDOT as well. But most of those numbers and the methodology of what they're coming up with, the calculations for those quantified impacts are coming from our consultant. But we vet those internally to make sure that obviously before we put anything, before they go any further, that we're vetting those ourselves internally. But to answer your first question, yeah, you will see through the CBA, you'll see the details pretty soon here. I think internally we need to go through them first. We just got the information a day or two ago, so we're still kind of going through the information right now ourselves. So like I said to Mayor Nichols earlier, in about a week or so, my hope is that we get it out there and get some final input as we work at this into the schedule. I do want to say, if I can go back to something earlier we picked up on, was the broad impacts, workforce, economic impacts, and then the local. I wonder if it makes sense to have those split up and have two separate, one local and one more broad state impact, something like that, if that would address the concerns that were brought up earlier about maybe focusing too much local and not enough statewide. Maybe if we have two, that's something we could look at as having two components and a measure for both as well. Something to consider.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks, everybody. We're going to migrate now back to the original link that we were given for the meeting. And we'll have a wrap-up conversation and then sort of next steps. So thank you all. I think this has been helpful.